Picture yourself at dinner in a cozy little restaurant somewhere in Europe. Your plate is sitting in Belgium, your dessert is waiting in the Netherlands, and you never left your chair. That is not a riddle. That is just a regular Tuesday in a town called Baarle. Stick around, because at the end of this story, there is a patch of grass, an ordinary field that waited about 800 years to find out which country it belonged to. At first glance, Baarle looks like any sleepy Dutch town. Brick houses, bike lanes, a church, a bakery. But look down at the sidewalk. There are little white crosses marked across the pavement. They run along the streets, across parking lots, and straight through buildings. Those crosses are an international border, the actual border between Belgium and the Netherlands. And it does not politely go around the town, it slices right through it. See, Baarle is technically two towns wearing the same streets. One is Dutch, one is Belgian. But here is the part that breaks people's brains. The Belgian town is not sitting next to the Dutch one. It is inside it, chopped into 22 separate pieces, scattered around like confetti. And inside some of those Belgian pieces, there are even smaller pockets of Dutch land. That is right. The Netherlands, inside Belgium, inside the Netherlands. Map nerds call these counter-enclaves, and they are among the rarest things in geography. So, the border cuts through backyards, shops, cafes, and living rooms. Which raises an obvious question. If the line runs through the middle of your house, which country do you live in? The answer is almost too good. It depends on your front door. Whichever country your front door opens into, that is your country. That is the actual official rule. And of course, people figured out how to game it. Whenever taxes were friendlier on the other side of the line, some homeowners simply renovated. They moved the front door a few feet down the wall. New door, new country, same couch. There is even one house where the door sits exactly on the line, so it has two addresses, a Dutch house number and a Belgian house number, side by side on the same wall. Two little flags, one very confused mailman. There is a clothing store where the line cuts the shop floor clean in half. Customers cross an international border just walking through the aisles. But my favorite trick happened at a cafe called Den Engel. Dutch law used to force restaurants to close earlier than Belgian law did, and the border ran right across the terrace. So at closing time, the owner did not send anyone home. He just moved his customers to the tables on the Belgian side. Same terrace, same drinks. Different country, different rules. The Dutch police could only stand there and watch, and it went way beyond closing hours. For years, a teenager too young to buy a beer in the Netherlands could simply cross the street. In Belgium, that same beer was perfectly legal. Even today, fireworks are sold year-round on the Belgian side. On the Dutch side, only around New Year's Eve. Guess where everyone shops in July? So, how does a mess like this even happen? Who draws a border through somebody's kitchen? Well, here is the thing. Nobody drew it, it grew. And to understand how, we need to go back to the Middle Ages. In the late 1100s, none of this land belonged to a country. Countries as we know them barely existed yet. Land belonged to noblemen, dukes, lords, and counts, trading fields like baseball cards. Two of them matter for our story, the Duke of Brabant and the Lord of Breda. They cut a deal. Some plots of land around Baarle went to the Duke, the rest stayed with the Lord. And these were not big, tidy blocks. They were individual farms, fields, and houses. A meadow here for the Duke, the farm right next to it for the Lord. Nobody bothered to draw a clean line, because nobody needed one. This was not about borders, it was about who collected the rent. Then the centuries rolled by. Wars came and went, crowns changed heads, empires rose and collapsed. And through all of it, the Lord's scattered lands ended up becoming part of the Netherlands. The Duke's scattered lands ended up on the side that became Belgium. That dusty medieval paperwork, field by field, house by house, quietly hardened into an international border. Nobody planned it. Nobody wanted it. It just happened. When Belgium became an independent country, the two governments finally looked at Baarle, and they realized they had a problem. You cannot draw a normal border through a jigsaw puzzle. So in the mid-1800s, they gave up on drawing a line. Instead, they did something gloriously stubborn. They went through almost 6,000 individual plots of land. and they assigned each one a nationality, one by one, based on centuries-old ownership records. Even then, they missed a spot. One little piece of the border was left completely undefined. Remember that. It comes back at the end. Now, you might think a border this silly could never actually matter, and for most of history, it did not. Then came the First World War. Germany invaded Belgium, but the Netherlands stayed neutral, and that created something incredible. The Belgian enclaves in Baarle were surrounded entirely by neutral Dutch soil. German troops could not set foot in them without invading the Netherlands. So, in the middle of occupied Europe, these tiny specks of Belgium stayed free. The Germans were not thrilled about this. They built an electrified fence along the occupied border, a thing locals called the Wire of Death. But inside the untouchable enclave, the Belgian resistance got creative. They smuggled in radio parts piece by piece. They built a secret transmitter with a huge antenna disguised so it would not draw attention. From a village the size of a postage stamp, they sent coded messages and jammed German signals. The German army could see it happening, and they could not do a thing about it. The tiny Belgian post office kept working too. It carried letters to Belgian soldiers at the front, without ever passing through occupied territory. In the Second World War, the tangled border turned into a smuggler's paradise. Rationing rules were different on each side of the line, so butter, sugar, gin, and even live cattle slipped quietly from one country to the other. When the border runs through your kitchen, smuggling is basically just walking. Fast forward to today. Europe opened its internal borders, and the line in Baarle faded into the background. No guards, no fences, just the white crosses on the pavement and the flags by the doors. The two towns even share one library, and yes, the border runs straight through the building. You can pick up a book in one country and read it in the other without leaving the room. But make no mistake, this is still two of everything. 2 mayors, 2 town halls, 2 police forces, 2 churches, 2 postal services, all for a community you can stroll across in a single afternoon. And on that stroll, you can cross an international border more than 50 times. Every once in a while, though, the sleeping border wakes up. During the pandemic, Belgium and the Netherlands had different lockdown rules. Masks required on one side of the line, optional on the other. Shops open on this sidewalk, closed on that one. People in Baarle had to check the crosses on the ground to know which rules applied to their feet. The invisible border was suddenly very visible again. Which brings us back to that patch of grass. Remember the spot the treaty makers missed in the 1800s? It was a small field near the edge of town. For more than a century, it officially belonged to nobody, not Belgium, not the Netherlands, a hole in the map of Europe, and it stayed that way until 1995. That year, the two countries finally signed the paperwork, and the field became Belgian, the last enclave, made official at last. 800 years after 2 medieval noblemen split this land, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. And honestly, that might be the real lesson of Baarle. We talk about borders like they are facts of nature, rivers, mountains, ancient walls. They are not. They are decisions, lines that people draw, forget, argue about, and sometimes leave unfinished for 8 centuries. Meanwhile, in Baarle, life just goes on. People eat dinner with their plate in one country and their dessert in another, and nobody there seems to mind at all. So, here is my question for you. If you could move your front door and switch countries overnight, which country would you pick? Tell me in the comments. And if you know another place where the map just gives up, drop it down there too. It might just become the next video.